Welcome back, Dan and Craig. Dan Capless gone, but have no fear. We have lots of Dans around here. He's become a regular on our show, and we sure appreciate that. Dan Maes, Republican candidate for governor of Colorado, the nominee, I should say. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Craig.
Let me ask you, how is that big boy Ben you got? How's your son weathering the storm?
He's doing a great job. The sad thing is he used to be so excited to have me around all the time, and now I'm kind of an extra fixture around the house. If I show up, he goes, "Hi, Dad. Yeah, whatever."
How old is your Benny boy? Remind us.
My Ben is 7 or 8. Is he sitting here with my wife in the car, pulled over? He's 7.
Well, right. You got to get those things down. He's the same age as Sam, which would mean he's the same age as Teddy Hickenlooper.
Give or take 6 months, they are.
Interesting stuff. Well, it'll be interesting for him to look back. He probably doesn't appreciate anything other than his dad isn't around as much. Dan, the big story in the Denver Post today, and I thought it was a bit of a dud because it's so long ago what happened in liberal Kansas. But the bottom line, we keep hearing that Tancredo ad. He says you were fired from the liberal Kansas Police Department. It appears to be so from what I read in the story. Were you fired?
Well, yeah, I think we covered that before, and we're very appreciative of the Post finally digging in deep enough to verify what I've always said, and that was that there was a KBI investigation, and I got caught up in it, and thank goodness for an old sergeant of mine, John Hardy, who stepped up and said, one day Maes was here, and the next day he was gone because of this investigation, and that's what I've been telling people all along.
And you think it was a case of somebody with influence and political stroke? You got too close to them and they got you fired by a chief of police who was interested in pleasing the powerful people?
Well, I don't really know what happened, but that's always been my story, and I'm sticking to it. We got too close to some people, and as I've said before, I walked in and I was pulled into the chief's office, and I was let go with absolutely no warning, no justification other than a little letter that says I was hanging out with the wrong people. And it's too bad the Post had to hide that so far down in the bottom of the article.
Do you think you did anything wrong back during your activities as a liberal Kansas police officer in connection with this bookmaking operation? They implied that you tipped off people inadvertently.
No, that's kind of, I've always stood up to the old guard, Craig, and, that's what I'm doing now in politics. And one of the quotes is from one of the old guard guys there that has always had a questionable history, but, I never tipped anybody off. I did what I was supposed to do. I was 23, 24 years old, doing the right thing. And it's kind of like the Corey Voorhees story. Corey felt he was doing the right thing, and he just got caught between some powerful people, and you find yourself without a job. And that's just what happened. I never disputed it. I never complained about it. I shook the dust off my sandals, and I moved on to Colorado, which is what I always wanted to do. And here we are running for governor, and now instead of talking about my job, 25 years ago, we need to start talking about people's jobs here.
It's interesting because you did have a job. You were carrying a badge, and I had the privilege of doing that for 16 years. And I was just wondering if I was dating a girl and I saw ledgers suggesting that somebody was booking football bets or something like that. I wondered if I would get involved or I would just kind of look the other way because that kind of criminal activity just doesn't bother me too much. Do you ever look back and think, boy, maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved in this? Or what's your attitude toward bookmaking?
I've never been a gambler. I never gambled at that time. My wife despises the practice, so in respect of her, I don't do any. And except for a couple slots machines in Vegas once in a while. And, I did the right thing because I stepped up. I did what I thought was right. I didn't turn my head. I came clean on what I knew with the people I felt I should come clean with. And I think that's the kind of character that people want to see in the governor's office. You've got to stand up to corruption.
Right.
and do what you think is right. And sometimes you take it on the chin for doing so, but that's the kind of guy I am.
And I'm sure the gambling activity was against Kansas law, so I understand that. We've been talking a lot about religion. It's the eve of Yom Kippur. It starts at sundown. And we've been talking about Christine O'Donnell. She's very religious. And I bet when you look at her in Delaware and you see that she had some low-level earnings in recent years, and it's been a little embarrassing, but now she appears to be on her way to being the darling of the Republican Party. Do you ever say, why can't that be me?
Well, it already is, believe it or not. I mean, we've still got some troops to rally, but, we won our primary on $150,000 without the big endorsements. And we're still working on some big endorsements going into the general. But, I'm proud of the fact that we won that primary pretty much on our own, of course, with great volunteers around us and great grassroots people and Tea Party 912 folks. But no big endorsements. We earned it, and now we've got to win it in November.
Well, let me ask you this, in terms of your conservative bona fides, because I know that's what bothers Dan Kaplis, who's on his way after doing some legal work. He says you're not a proven conservative because you don't have a record on that. Christine O'Donnell, she has been on the periphery for a while, espousing conservative causes. What can we look back in your last 10 or 20 years that would convince conservative voters that, you know what, Dan Maes, I know he's conservative, and here's why?
Well, I think, being in business year after year after year doesn't necessarily mean you're a conservative, but it means that you're fiscally responsible and you know how to balance a budget, even if it is a small business. I think more so, why not talk about religion a little bit? But I'll tell you one thing, the thing that disgusts me most in this race are people who claim to be Bible-carrying Christians who are probably the greatest hypocrites in the world. But I taught, now you get me to do that.
Well, but you brought it up.
Well, but my example is, we've been at the same Southern Baptist church pretty much for 10 years. I spent 7 years teaching adult Bible studies there, being a facilitator and a teacher and believing in the conservative values that we find are biblical. And people who know us know that. People who want to ask can. They can call. I had some people call the church to verify that we're really members where we say we're members. Isn't that something? And that's the conservative background I have. Some of my public service, I put on my bio page, reflects, I think, conservative values. But you know what? People have always been able to just call me, talk to me, email me. They can't do it as easily now as they used to. But I think my actions have matched my words. My work ethic matches my words.
Were you brought up as Southern Baptist?
No, I was raised Lutheran. I can't remember if it was Wisconsin or Missouri.
So what was it about being a Southern Baptist that appealed to you?
It was it was a middle ground for my wife and I. She was raised even more conservative than that, and I was a little towards the middle, and we found a middle ground, believe it or not, at the Southern Baptist Church, and that's where I really connected with Scripture and the philosophies behind Scripture. And I'm not going to say, no way am I going to begin to pretend I'm perfect. That's the beauty of our Christian faith is we're not perfect, but we are forgiven, and I don't mean to be trite. But, these are the philosophies I live by each day. I do my best to do it, and I try not to be hypocritical. When Dan kind of chides me a little bit, when I'm debating John Hickenlooper, I believe in keeping the bar high, and I keep the message positive, and I think that's why we've been successful on the campaign trail.
What about
the positive message?
Sure. What about the debates today? Can you give us some advance on what we should be reading in the paper tomorrow about them?
Oh, I think you're going to hear that, first of all, the first one wasn't a debate. The first one was a forum. One of us went for 10, 15 minutes and the next and the next. So that was more of a forum environment. John went first this morning. The minor party candidate went second, and I went third. And then we went up to Loveland, and that was more of a debate. There was some jabbing and poking going on there. I think what you're going to hear is every time that minor party candidate tried to drag the quality of the conversation down.
You say minor party candidate, you're talking about Fester?
Talking about the congressman, and I'll tell you what, he took a cheap shot, and John Hickenlooper said, I'm not even going to dignify that with a response, and the audience applauded. And
so it was a cheap shot at Hickenlooper?
It was a cheap shot at Hickenlooper. It was a correct shot. But
what was it about?
I want to think it was about. It was one of two things. It was either it was about Frontier leaving, I think, and there's a debate. The debate was going between the two of them about why Frontier left, and they were having a disagreement.
Yeah, well, we're in the middle of that because we had Chief Executive Officer Bateman on, and he said it's because of the taxes in Denver, Colorado.
Well, and that's what the congressman was saying, and
so how is that? How is that a cheap shot?
Because I can't remember the exact words he chose, but it was below the belt, or it was about the one of the other issues that he's gotten busted on lately. And again, what the congressman said was true.
Right, and the reason I said Fester is because yesterday you referred to him as Uncle Fester on KOA. Today he's the minor party candidate. I call him Tom Tancredo.
And you can, because that's his name. But what happened is, as soon as the hits went below the belt, the audience didn't like it.
This audience likes it, Dan. I have to tell you, and I like it. And I know we've taken a lot of your time. Any final words from you? Because we really appreciate you coming on.
Well, I always appreciate you guys. Sometimes, Dan has a little sport with me. And here's what I want to say. The truth came out about this liberal Kansas situation, and now it's time to move on, and people can say, you know what, maybe people have been unfair to this guy. Maybe he hasn't been getting a fair shake, and we got to start listening to him. My yes means yes, my no means no, and I'll leave it at that. And now it's time to talk about the future.
You always answer my final question. Where in Colorado is Dan Maes right now?
Right now, I am sitting, everybody knows this spot. It's right at the top of Mount Vernon Canyon where the buffalo herd is. We pulled off at the side of the road so we wouldn't lose our signal during our conversation.
Very responsible and radio-friendly, I might add. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Have a great weekend.
You too. That's Dan Maes.